Demand didn't disappear, it compressed. So intent moved first, behavior followed, and revenue showed up last. If you manage from revenue alone, you're always going to react. And if you manage from intent, then you're going to shape outcome. So manage from intent and shape your outcome for 2026.
How much should you be charging for your short-term rental? What should your minimum stay strategy look like? And what is the data telling us about 2026? Zak Ali from Launchbase has been crunching the numbers and is here to answer all these questions and more on today's House Planet podcast. Zak, thank you for joining us on the House Planet podcast. Length of stay dropped just about everywhere for short-term rental operators in 2025. How should property managers prepare for this in 2026?
Yeah, of course. So I think with regards to length of stay, I mean, looking at the data that I've observed, I think the length of stay came down to around 3.7 nights. For 2025 across the operators that were looked at in terms of the data. I think for 2026, operators should read it more of a behavioral signal, not a warning sign, if you like. So shorter stays mean tighter intent, so not weaker demand. And the risk isn't the length of stay falling as such, it's actually managing calendars. So when I say managing calendars, I mean if guests are actually going, whether guests are actually going to stay a full week or whether they're going to stay a couple of times a week. That's basically what should be at the forefront of your calendar management strategy. Also, that's where block demand sits. And if you don't manage it properly, then late discounting and volatility tends to creep into your calendars, which isn't good for any revenue strategy at all.
In terms of minimum stays, so we'll get really specific and simple for all the house and property managers out there. When the length of stay is reducing, how do you get your minimum stay strategy right? And what would you be advising people to do to make sure that they've got the right minimum stay strategy?
So your minimum stay strategy should be looked at on an annual basis when you are looking at, you look at your pricing approach, your pricing strategy, your commercial strategy, everything else that you renew on an annual basis, and therefore your minimum stay should also be looked at on an annual basis. Having a look at the data and understanding what the length of stay patterns were for 2025 in this case does help with the approach that you need to take within 2026. So, I've experienced it myself where you have operators who are very adamant that they just want to have a 7-night minimum stay, and that's fine if that's what their approach is. But using the data that's available, you should go and talk to those operators and show them the shift in length of stay and bring them on board with what it is that you need to do in terms of renewing those minimum stays. And I think that approach needs to happen at least, if not more than a year, more times in a year, at least once in a year.
Okay, real talk now for all you hosts out there. You know that moment when your guest messages you again with, "Hey, what's the Wi-Fi code?" Or you're staring at 5 different calendars, wondering if you've accidentally double booked the cottage. Yes, we've all been there. That's why here at House Planet, we recommend Housefully. It's basically your rentals control center. It handles bookings across all the big platforms, syncs your calendars to ensure there are no double bookings, automates guest messages, and even creates these really slick digital guidebooks that stop all the repeat questions. Honestly, it just makes your life easier and keeps your guests happier, helping you achieve those all-important 5-star reviews. And here is a little bonus. If you're a House Planet listener, you can get $500 off onboarding for Housefully's property management software and 30% off digital guidebooks for life. Just hit the link in the show notes and use the codes PLANET500 for the PMS and HousePlanetGB for the guidebooks. And if you'd like a proper walkthrough, there's also a link to book a demo with Frank Bosey from Housefully. He will show you how it all works. Less stress, more bookings, sorted with Housefully. Do you think the length of stay trend is going to continue? Do you think it might drop further in 2026, or are we at the floor now?
I think, well, looking at the data, the data that I've seen that's available to us, all indications do state that there will be some further decrease in length of stay. So, looking at the business on the books at the moment, when I looked at the data, I think it was around 3.6, 3.5. So it had come down slightly. The expectations, I believe, are that it will sit around that mark. But I mean, anything could change it, right?
In terms of rates, then, where are we? I saw a report out at the end of last year saying rates had gone up a little bit, and we've heard it from various sources that rates have kind of gone up a little bit in the UK in 2025. And I actually took part in a webinar about this, and they said, have rates gone up where you're operating? I said, well, rates have gone up a little bit, like in my case, but mainly it's been to cover the expenses because the expenses have gone up. So what do we expect from rates in 2026, and what happened last year?
Okay, so with regards to rates specifically, then, and looking at the data for 2025, the UK overall shift in rates or in average daily rate was around 4% from the data that I've seen. Now, what actually changed in 2025 wasn't necessarily a price shift. Obviously, you've mentioned that some people put their prices up to cover the costs, but then the costs also increase at the same time. So realistically, there was no specific price increase in that context. I think looking at the data, what I felt from the data that actually did increase was the tolerance. So guest tolerance for week value nights actually collapsed. And I think across the UK, people were still willing to pay, but they just became far less willing to fill those nights on calendars, which generally are awkward gap nights or shoulder nights, if you like. And that in turn then inflated the ADR position to the 4% increase that we saw, not necessarily an increase in prices.
Yeah, so people aren't necessarily earning more money; they're just covering their costs. It would appear kind of that's the market we're in at the moment. Your short-term rental business is evolving fast, but how do you keep up with the latest regulation, tax changes, and industry trends? The answer is to attend the House Planet Roadshow, which is coming to a city near you in 2026. This is the UK's premier event for holiday let professionals, supported by the Short-Term Accommodation Association, Price Labs, and the Women in Short-Term Rentals community. This is your essential opportunity for learning, networking, and expert insight. Starting in Cornwall on the 5th of February, you'll spend a full day mastering compliance, optimizing your revenue strategies, and sharing lessons learned with your peers. After Cornwall, we'll be in Portsmouth on the 4th of March and London on the 23rd of April. That's the day after the Short Stay Summit. Later in the year, we'll be heading to Nottingham, Bath, Chester, and Edinburgh. So don't navigate the complex 2026 market alone. Learn from the leaders driving the industry forward and shape the short-term rental conversation in your market. Tickets are just £40 each and available now from our website. Head to houseplanet.club for further details. Another hot topic has been the very short booking windows. This is definitely something that I've experienced as a host with a couple of properties. A lot of people booking on the day or the day before or a couple of days before they arrive. What's your take on this trend? What happened in 2025? And again, should we expect this trend to continue this year?
Yeah, with regards to planning windows and behavior changes, I mean, planning windows compressed without a shadow of a doubt. That's, I guess, any data that you look at will give you that indication or outcome. So guests still planned, but they committed later. And when they did commit, they actually committed with a lot more of a clearer intent. So changed in terms of trip types as well. So fewer longer trips were observed. So open-ended holidays and more defined short breaks. I think the shift doesn't reduce revenue, but it does actually make calendar control far more important. And this is why you've mentioned about minimum prices or minimum stays, if you like. This is why it becomes so important to manage the calendar strategy and continue to check it on an annual basis to ensure that you are in line with the behavior changes and the planning windows that you are observing within your markets.
If a host or a property manager comes to you and says, Zach, I'm getting loads of last minute bookings and I'm getting worried at the same time because I'm expecting to get these bookings, but I'm looking at an empty calendar. Should they be reducing the rate or should they be holding their nerve when it comes to their rates?
So I think that's a really important question. And I think that's really where search activity comes into the mix rather than just looking at bookings that have actually happened. So as part of the data exercise that I did, you'll be able to reference or see from the presentation that we've got. It shows very clearly what happened in terms of search activity within 2025. So what we saw in the data was that, for example, I think it was in June, we saw that the search activity peaked and bookings followed around about 3 weeks later. So that 3-week window is what you would call the reaction window. So it's a crucial window where the operators can adjust your rates, your visibility and your strategy. And that's really where demand is hot. So tanking your rates or panicking isn't the right strategy. You've got to understand what your reaction window looks like. And that's where you need the support of your search data, not only your booking data. Because when you put both of them together, it allows you to have a clear-cut vision of what you can expect to happen rather than panic discounting or stressing about not receiving the bookings that you feel you should be receiving.
Hold your nerve, people. Hold your nerve. So you and I very soon will be in Cornwall for the Host Planet Roadshow, the very first event. Cornwall's a market, of course, that everybody thinks that they understand because it's such a major part of the UK short-term rental industry. But what's the data telling you from what happened there in 2025?
I mean, it was very interesting. I'm really glad we looked at it in the details that we did. But Cornwall didn't win or lose, in my opinion. Looking at the data, it compressed. So peak summer looked very familiar, but the revenue, or the real win, if you like, shifted into the shoulder periods, so into the shoulder seasons. So when you break down Cornwall by size and location, so 3-bed homes and well-positioned areas performed really well. They were driven by occupancy rather than price. And from what I saw in the data, the money wasn't made by pushing August harder. It was made by improving April, May, September, and October specifically. And that's really where the operators who really won in terms of Cornwall this year saw the biggest difference.
So what's your advice to Cornish operators in 2026? What do they need to be looking out for?
I think in terms of looking ahead, obviously take the teachings or the learnings that we've seen for this year, but really focus on those shoulder periods. Really focus on those shoulder periods. So everything you've mentioned in terms of minimum stay, reevaluating your what we talked about in terms of reaction windows, and having a look at your shoulder performance for this year. Bring that into your strategy for 2026 and really focus on those areas. We know that summer sells and it will sell. And yeah, you'll be able to achieve the maximum rates or revenue, hopefully, that you can for that period. But there is demand available within the shoulder seasons. As long as your strategy and your setup is correct, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to capitalize on that demand.
Are you expecting a pretty similar year again? Is 2026, do you think, going to look quite similar to 2025?
I think so, yeah. Look, all the indications at the moment do show a similar sort of performance. Post-pandemic, we've seen the increases that we saw, but now 24, 25 specifically, I think is more of a normalized curve now. So what we see in 2025, we should treat as a more normalized trading year. And therefore, if anybody does want to benchmark, realistically 25, to some degree 24, is a good year to benchmark. But I do think that from a 2026 point of view, we are kind of like normalized in terms of where we're going to be for Cornwall.
In your presentation, and we'll put a link to this in the show notes, you've framed 2026 as expectations rather than a forecast. So how should people interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to sit there and do a full-fledged forecast of the Cornwall data that I got, because there's a lot of noise obviously in terms of the trading data that we are seeing at the moment. But naturally, it's a good expectation for us to follow. I think it's an implication slide, so it's not a prediction. Everything here flows in terms of what we see in 2025 and what the early signals are in 2026. I think what's really important is that demand hasn't reset, it's almost reorganized. So, like I've said, peak will still matter, but it won't stretch enough to save those weak calendars. The upside, if you like, will continue to sit in the shoulders. 2026 isn't going to be about being more aggressive, but I do think it's about being more deliberate and acting much earlier than you probably did in 2025. And that's really where, as an operator, you should be looking at search data, for example, rather than just booking data, because search data tells you intent rather than just what's actually happened post the bookings.
If a property management company approached you and just said, I hear what you're saying, I think you're right, I really want to get my shoulder seasons right and make sure that I'm getting the bookings that maybe my competitors are getting, what should they do to get them? What are the specific tactics they can use?
So if you want to get shoulder season right, I think what the real big sticking point in my own experience and understanding the data from what I see in terms of where the missed opportunities are, if you like, are lack of flexibility. I think, obviously, from a property management company's point of view, sometimes you are quite restricted in terms of having the flexibility because these are the owner expectations and this is what they want to achieve. But I think it's educating the owners with some good data visualizations that you can have access to and show them how the market has actually changed. I think flexibility will remain the key point. Having flexibility in terms of your minimum stays, in terms of your minimum prices, in terms of your distribution. Some people don't distribute, short breaks, for example, on those channels where you are able to capitalize on short break bookings. So I think flexibility will be key and a critical part in 2026. And as we've said, when you are observing your annual performance, it's something that should be constantly monitored. So speaking to the key stakeholders within the business from an operator's point of view, and making sure they're on board with flexibility and opening up to more of those options that are available is going to be critical.
Also, in your presentation, you've mentioned quite a bit about demand intent. Why does intent matter more than bookings?
I guess with regards to demand intent, so let's just be a little bit clear for the audience here what we mean by that, first of all. So demand intent and early signals, we're referring to the search demand of the bookings. So bookings are confirmations and search, if you like, is formation. So search tells us when confidence is returning and planning starts, even before people commit. So in 2025, what we saw in the data, search momentum, if you like, moved earlier and it stayed much stronger than 2024. That gave operators an early signal that demand was waking up. Now, it's not a forecast. We can't ever forecast just purely off the back of search demand. But really importantly, it's an early signal that gives you time to position yourself rather than have to react after. And that's why it's super important to ensure that you bring your demand intent into your revenue strategy.
When you look at where demand came from and when people were searching, what stood out most to you?
What stood out was stability rather than surprise. So the core domestic demand held for what we saw in the data. International remained selective, and timing mattered more than volume. So people didn't actually stop searching, but they searched with intent, and that's closer to travel. That reinforces the idea that demand didn't disappear, it just became a lot more deliberate. And that's the core message that you should take when you are trying to understand where demand actually came from.
So when you step back and look at all the UK data from 2025, what's the big regional story that you're seeing?
So the big story that we saw in the data is that the same demand environment played out, but very differently, if you like, depending on the market type. So we saw that urban markets benefited from short stays and events. Coastal markets were very time sensitive, and rural markets lagged slightly, but followed the same behavioral patterns. So performance wasn't about who had demand, but it was actually about who converted it efficiently.
And how do you convert demand efficiently?
Yeah, so you take the product that you're offering and match it with a customer type that you're actually trying to target. And I mean, it sounds really easy, right? But it is. Once you actually take the right product and position it in front of the right customer, then conversion definitely has a stronger chance of the booking has a stronger chance of being converted efficiently.
Yeah, and breaking it right down, and this boils down to operators knowing exactly who their target guests are and going to the places where they hang out.
Exactly that. And, I'm sure you've heard it many times and we've spoken about it many times, but the revenue management cycle is there for a reason, right? So the right product, the right time, the right price, the right location, and the right distribution channel. And that's basically what it comes down to. You follow the cycle, then you really can't go wrong.
Keep it simple. So if somebody's listening then and taking one thing from this session, what should it be?
So demand didn't disappear, it compressed. That's a given. So intent moved first, behavior followed, and revenue showed up last. I think if you manage from revenue alone, you're always going to react. And if you manage from intent, then you're going to shape outcome. So manage from intent and shape your outcome for 2026.
Sounds like very good advice. Now, as we mentioned before, you and I are going to be at the first Roadshow event in Cornwall on the 5th of February. You were at several industry events last year and in recent years. Just tell us the value of attending industry events and why people should join us on the day.
It's fantastic. I think more specifically, it's fantastic from an educational point of view. I mean, we both were in Italy, and I mean, a lot of people would have gone to that event that we met. Well, actually did go to that event that we met who didn't actually trade within Italy. But the consensus that we all came to was how beneficial it was from an educational point of view, because a lot of people have a lot of experience and practice, and something that you might not have come across within your own markets, somebody else may have come across in a different market, and people are there to share. People are there to share, to support each other, and I think that's really where the value sits in these events, and that's, I think, what we're going to have within all of the roadshow events that we've got coming up. And if anybody wants to really learn and broaden their experience, understanding, or even, ask questions, trial new things, then it's the place to be.
And you and I are the co-founders of Launchbase, of course, which is going to be involved in all the roadshow events. Just tell us a little bit about Launchbase and where people can find out more info.
Well, obviously, yes, absolutely. We have our LinkedIn channel now set up. We have our website. You can obviously contact us directly. It's a fantastic platform to support property management companies, operators, tech providers, anybody who really needs support specifically from a digital marketing and also a revenue management point of view. We know, and we've come across so many operators who are in the market at the moment who either don't have anybody allocated, to carry out the discipline, if you like, within their own business, or they're just not sure where to start, or they just need a helping hand. You can give us a call or you can give us a shout, because that's basically what we're here to do. We also offer revenue management auditing, for example, and the audits are great to go into business to understand what it is that actually it is that you're doing and how you could look to making it better. If that is something that is there to happen, you might not need to make anything better. Everything might be working fantastically well for you, which is great. And we'll tell you that in the audits, but the audits are a great place to start. And yeah, if you're obviously interested in anything like that, then give us a shout.
And we'll put all the details in the show notes. Yeah, and as Zach was saying, and one thing both of us have come across a lot in the industry is companies that are struggling with revenue management and marketing. We see these two issues come up again and again, and Launchbase exists to help businesses, and mainly property management businesses, but also any other STR business. If you have issues with digital marketing, please do get in touch, and I'm sure there'll be ways that you can work with us, and we can help you to get your name out there and to get your company running as efficiently as possible, and get you in front of the right audience. And as part of the House Planner ecosystem, we can certainly get you in front of a lot of STR professionals, hosts, property managers all around the world. Well, Zach, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the show, and I will see you in Cornwall for the first Roadshow stop on the 5th of Feb. Great to chat to Zak Ali there from Launchbase. I hope you found that episode useful. That's just about it for today's show. Remember, this podcast is brought to you in collaboration with Housefully, which is trusted by short-term rental professionals across the globe. As a House Planner listener, you get 2 exclusive offers: $500 off onboarding for Housefully's property management software. Just use the code PLANET500, and 30% off digital guidebooks for life. Use the code HousePlanetGB. To grab these deals, click the link in the show notes or head to housefully.com. For more free education, tips and trends from the STR industry, visit houseplanet.club, where you can sign up for our newsletter, listen to our podcasts, and download a suite of ebooks for hosts and property managers. That's it for today's episode. Until next time, happy hosting.